INS Vikrant, from Sanskrit vikrānta, courageous, was a Majestic-class aircraft carrier of the Indian Navy. The ship was laid down as HMS Hercules for the British Royal Navy during World War II, but construction was put on hold when the war ended. India purchased the incomplete carrier in 1957, and construction was completed in 1961. Vikrant was commissioned as the first aircraft carrier of the Indian Navy and played a key role in enforcing the naval blockade of East Pakistan during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. In its later years, the ship underwent major refits to embark modern aircraft, before being decommissioned in January 1997. She was preserved as a museum ship in Cuffe Parade, Mumbai until 2012. In January 2014, the ship was sold through an online auction and scrapped in November 2014 after final clearance from the Supreme Court. In 1943, the Royal Navy commissioned 6 light aircraft carriers in an effort to counter the German and Japanese navies. The 1942 design Light Fleet Carrier, commonly referred to as the British Light Fleet Carrier, was the result. Serving with 8 navies between 1944 and 2001, these ships were designed and constructed by civilian shipyards as an intermediate step between the full-sized fleet aircraft carriers and the less expensive but limited capability escort carriers. 16 light fleet carriers were ordered, and all were laid down as what became the Colossus-class in 1942 and 1943. The final 6 ships were modified during construction to handle larger and faster aircraft, and were redesignated the Majestic-class. The improvements from the Colossus-class to the Majestic-class included heavier displacement, armament, catapult, aircraft lifts and aircraft capacity. Construction on the ships was suspended at the end of World War II, as the ships were surplus to the Royal Navy's peacetime requirements. Instead, the carriers were modernized and sold to several Commonwealth nations. The ships were similar, but each varied depending on the requirements of the country to which the ship was sold. HMS Hercules, the 5th ship in the Majestic-class, was ordered on August 7, 1942 and laid down on October 14, 1943 by Vickers Armstrongs on the River Tyne. After World War II ended with Japan's surrender on September 2, 1945, she was launched on September 22, and her construction was suspended in May 1946. At the time of suspension, she was 75% complete. Her hull was preserved, and in May 1947 she was laid up in Gareloch off the Clyde. In January 1957, she was purchased by India and was towed to Belfast to complete her construction and modifications by Harland and Wolff. Several improvements to the original design were ordered by the Indian Navy, including an angled deck, steam catapults, and a modified island. Vikrant displaced 16,000 t, 15,750 long tons, at standard load and 19,500 t, 19,200 long tons, at deep load. She had an overall length of 700 feet 210 meters, a beam of 128 feet 39 meters and a mean deep draft of 24 feet 7.3 meters. She was powered by a pair of Parsons-geared steam turbines, driving 2 propeller shafts, using steam provided by 4 Admiralty 3-drum boilers. The turbines developed a total of 40,000 indicated horsepower, 30,000 kilowatts, which gave a maximum speed of 25 knots, 46 kilometers per hour, 29 miles per hour. Vikrant carried about 3,175 t, 3,125 long tons, of fuel oil that gave her a range of 12,000 nmi, 22,000 kilometers, 14,000 miles, at 14 knots, 26 kilometers per hour, 16 miles per hour, and 6,200 miles 10,000 kilometers at 23 knots, 43 kilometers per hour, 26 miles per hour. The air and ship crew comprised 1,110 officers and men. The ship was armed with 16 40mm, 1.6-in, Bofors anti-aircraft guns, but these were later reduced to 8. At various times, its aircraft consisted of Hawker Seahawk and Sea Harrier, Stockwell, jet fighters, Sea King Mk-42B and HAL Chetak helicopters, and Brigadali's ABR-1050 anti-submarine aircraft. The carrier fielded between 21 and 23 aircraft of all types. Vikrant's flight decks were designed to handle aircraft up to 24,000 pounds, 11,000 kilograms, but 20,000 pounds 9,100 kilograms remained the heaviest landing weight of an aircraft. Larger 54 by 34 feet, 16.5 by 10.4 m, lifts were installed. The ship was equipped with one LW-05 air search radar, 1 ZW-06 surface search radar, 1 LW-10 tactical radar and 1 Type 963 aircraft landing radar with other communication systems. The Indian Navy's first aircraft carrier was commissioned as INS Vikrant on March 4, 1961 in Belfast by Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, the Indian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. The name Vikrant was derived from the Sanskrit word vikrānta meaning stepping beyond, courageous or bold. Captain Pritam Singh Mahindra was the first commanding officer of the ship, which carried British Hawker Seahawk fighter bombers and French Alizé anti-submarine aircraft. On May 18, 1961, the first jet landed on her deck. It was piloted by Lieutenant Radha Krishna Hariram Tahilayani, who later served as Admiral-in-Chief of the Naval Staff of India from 1984 to 1987. Vikrant formally joined the Indian Navy's fleet in Bombay, now Mumbai, on November 3, 1961, when she was received at Ballard Pier by then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. In December of that year, the ship was deployed for Operation Vijay, the code name for the annexation of Goa, off the coast of Goa with 2 destroyers, INS Rajput and INS Kirpan. Vikrant did not see action, and patrolled along the coast to deter foreign interference. During the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965, Vikrant was in dry dock refitting, and did not see any action. In June 1970, Vikrant was docked at the Naval Dockyard, Bombay, due to many internal fatigue cracks and fissures in the water drums of her boilers that could not be repaired by welding. As replacement drums were not available locally, 4 new ones were ordered from Britain, and Naval Headquarters issued orders not to use the boilers until further notice. On February 26, 1971, the ship was moved from Ballard Pier Extension to the anchorage, without replacement drums. The main objective behind this move was to light up the boilers at reduced pressure, and work up the main and flight deck machinery that had been idle for almost 7 months. On March 1, the boilers were ignited, and basin trials up to 40 revolutions per minute, RPM, were conducted. Catapult trials were conducted on the same day. The ship began preliminary sea trials on March 18 and returned 2 days later. Trials were again conducted on 26 to 27 April. The Navy decided to limit the boilers to a pressure of 400 pounds per square inch, 2,800 kilopascals, and the propeller revolutions to 120 rpm ahead and 80 rpm astern, reducing the ship's speed to 14 knots, 26 kilometers per hour, 16 miles per hour. With the growing expectations of a war with Pakistan in the near future, the Navy started to transfer its ships to strategically advantageous locations in Indian waters. The primary concern of Naval Headquarters about the operation was the serviceability of Vikrant. When asked his opinion regarding the involvement of Vikrant in the war, Fleet Operations Officer Captain Gulab Mohanlal Hiranandani told the Chief of the Naval Staff Admiral Sardar Ilalmuthradas Nanda. During the 1965 war, Vikrant was sitting in Bombay Harbour and did not go out to sea. If the same thing happened in 1971, Vikrant would be called a white elephant and naval aviation would be written off. Vikrant had to be seen being operational even if we didn't fly any aircraft. Nanda and Hiranandani proved to be instrumental in taking Vikrant to war. There were objections that the ship might have severe operational difficulties that would expose the carrier to increased danger on operations. In addition, the 3 Daphne-class submarines acquired by the Pakistan Navy posed a significant risk to the carrier. In June, extensive deep-sea trials were carried out, with steel safety harnesses around the 3 boilers still operational. Observation windows were fitted as a precautionary measure to detect any steam leaks. By the end of June, the trials were complete and Vikrant was cleared to participate on operations, with its speed restricted to 14 knots. As a part of preparations for the war, Vikrant was assigned to the Eastern Naval Command, then to the Eastern Fleet. This fleet consisted of INS Vikrant, the 2 Leopard-class frigates INS Brahmaputra and INS Vyas, the 2 Petya III-class corvettes INS Kamorda and INS Kavarati, and 1 submarine, INS Kandari. The main reason behind strengthening the Eastern Fleet was to counter the Pakistani maritime forces deployed in support of military operations in East Bengal. A surveillance area of 18,000 square miles, 47,000 square kilometers, confined by a triangle with a base of 270 miles 430 kilometers and sides of 165 miles 266 kilometers and 225 miles 362 kilometers, was set up in the Bay of Bengal. Any ship in this area was to be challenged and checked. If found to be neutral, it would be escorted to the nearest Indian port, otherwise, it would be captured and taken as a war prize. In the meantime, intelligence reports confirmed that Pakistan was to deploy a US-built Tench-class submarine, PNS Ghazi. Ghazi was considered as a serious threat to Vikrant by the Indian Navy, as Vikrant's approximate position would be known by the Pakistanis once she started operating aircraft. Of the 4 available surface ships, INS Cuffe Parade had no sonar, which meant that the other 3 had to remain in close vicinity 5 to 10 miles, 8.0 to 16.1 kilometers, of Vikrant, without which the carrier would be completely vulnerable to attack by Ghazi. On July 23, Vikrant sailed off to Cochin in company with the Western Fleet. En route, before reaching Cochin on July 26, seeking landing trials were carried out. After the completion of the radar and communication trials on July 28, she departed for Madras, escorted by Brahmaputra and Bias. The next major problem was operating aircraft from the carrier. The commanding officer of the ship, Captain, later Vice Admiral, S. Prakash, was seriously concerned about flight operations. He was concerned that aircrew morale would be adversely affected if flight operations were not undertaken, which could be disastrous. Naval headquarters remained stubborn on the speed restrictions and sought confirmation from Prakash whether it was possible to embark in Alizé without compromising the speed restrictions. The speed restrictions imposed by the headquarters meant that Alizé aircraft would have to land at close to stalling speed. Eventually, the aircraft weight was reduced, which allowed several of the aircraft to embark, along with a Seahawk squadron. By the end of September, Vikrant and her escorts reached Port Blair. En route to Visakhapatnam, tactical exercises were conducted in the presence of the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Eastern Naval Command. From Visakhapatnam, Vikrant set out for Madras for maintenance. Rear Admiral S.H. Sharma was appointed Flag Officer commanding Eastern Fleet and arrived at Visakhapatnam on October 14. After receiving the reports that Pakistan might launch preemptive strikes, maintenance was stopped for another tactical exercise, which was completed during the night of 26 to 27 October at Visakhapatnam. Vikrant then returned to Madras to resume maintenance. On November 1, the Eastern Fleet was formally constituted, and on November 13, all the ships set out for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. To avoid misadventures, it was planned to sail Vikrant to a remote anchorage, isolating it from combat. Simultaneously, deception signals would give the impression that Vikrant was operating somewhere between Madras and Visakhapatnam. On November 23, an emergency was declared in Pakistan after a clash of Indian and Pakistani troops in East Pakistan 2 days earlier. On December 2, the Eastern Fleet proceeded to its patrol area in anticipation of an attack by Pakistan. The Pakistan Navy had deployed Ghazi on November 14 with the explicit goal of targeting and sinking Vikrant, and Ghazi reached a location near Madras by the 23rd. In an attempt to deceive the Pakistan Navy and Ghazi, India's naval headquarters deployed Rajput as a decoy. The ship sailed 160 miles 260 kilometers off the coast of Visakhapatnam and broadcast a significant amount of radio traffic, making her appear to be Vikrant. Ghazi, meanwhile, sank off the Visakhapatnam coast under mysterious circumstances. On the night of 3 to 4 December, a muffled underwater explosion was detected by a coastal battery. The next morning, a local fisherman observed flotsam near the coast, causing Indian naval officials to suspect a vessel had sunk off the coast. The next day, a clearance diving team was sent to search the area, and they confirmed that Ghazi had sunk in shallow waters. The reason for Ghazi's fate is unclear. The Indian Navy's official historian, Hiranandani, suggests 3 possibilities, after having analyzed the position of the rudder and extent of the damage suffered. The first was that Ghazi had come up to periscope depth to identify her position and may have seen an anti-submarine vessel that caused her to crash dive, which in turn may have led her to bury her bow in the bottom. The second possibility is closely related to the first. On the night of the explosion, Rajput was on patrol off Visakhapatnam and observed a severe disturbance in the water. Suspecting that it was a submarine, the ship dropped 2 depth charges on the spot, on a position that was very close to the wreckage. The third possibility is that there was a mishap when Ghazi was laying mines on the day before hostilities broke out. Vikrant was redeployed towards Chittagong at the outbreak of hostilities. On December 4, the ship Seahawk struck shipping in Chittagong and Cox's Bazar harbors, sinking or incapacitating most of the ships present. Later strikes targeted Kunda and the port of Mangla, which continued until December 10, while other operations were flown to support a naval blockade of East Pakistan. On December 14, the Seahawks attacked the cantonment area in Chittagong, destroying several Pakistani army barracks. Medium anti-aircraft fire was encountered during this strike. Simultaneous attacks by Alizés continued on Cox's Bazar. After this, Vikrant's fuel levels dropped to less than 25%, and the aircraft carrier sailed to Paradip for refueling. The crew of INS Vikrant earned 2 Mahavir Chakras and 12 Veer Chakra gallantry medals for their part in the war. Vikrant did not see much service after the war, and was given 2 major modernization refits, the first one from 1979 to 1981 and the second one from 1987 to 1989. In the first phase, her boilers, radars, communication systems, and anti-aircraft guns were modernized, and facilities to operate Sea Harriers were installed. In the second phase, facilities to operate the new Sea Harrier vertical/short takeoff and land (V/STOL) fighter aircraft and the new Sea King Mk-42B anti-submarine warfare (ASW) helicopters were introduced. A 9.75-degree ski jump ramp was fitted. The steam catapult was removed during this phase. Again in 1991, Vikrant underwent a 6-month refit, followed by another 14-month refit in 1992 to 94. She remained operational thereafter, flying Sea Harriers, Sea Kings and Chatuks until her final sea outing on November 23, 1994. In the same year, a fire was also recorded aboard. In January 1995, the Navy decided to keep Vikrant in safe-to-float state. She was laid up and formally decommissioned on January 31, 1997. During her service, INS Vikrant embarked 4 squadrons of the Naval Air Arm of the Indian Navy. Following decommissioning in 1997, the ship was earmarked for preservation as a museum ship in Mumbai. Lack of funding prevented progress on the ship's conversion to a museum, and it was speculated that the ship would be made into a training ship. In 2001, the ship was opened to the public by the Indian Navy, but the government of Maharashtra was unable to find a partner to operate the museum on a permanent, long-term basis, and the museum was closed after it was deemed unsafe for the public in 2012. In August 2013, Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, chief of the Western Naval Command, said the Ministry of Defense would scrap the ship as she had become very difficult to maintain and no private bidders had offered to fund the museum's operations. On December 3, 2013, the Indian government decided to auction the ship. The Bombay High Court dismissed a public interest lawsuit filed by Kiran Pagankar to stop the auction, stating the vessel's dilapidated condition did not warrant her preservation, nor were the necessary funds or government support available. In January 2014, the ship was sold through an online auction to a Dharwad shipbreaker for 60 Indian rupees crore, $8.4 million. The Supreme Court of India dismissed another lawsuit challenging the ship's sale and scrapping on August 14, 2014. Vikrant remained beached off Dwarka in Mumbai port while awaiting the final clearances of the Mumbai Port Trust. On November 12, 2014, the Supreme Court gave its final approval for the carrier to be scrapped, which commenced on November 22, 2014. In memory of Vikrant, the Vikrant Memorial was unveiled by Vice Admiral Surinder Pal Singh Chema, Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Naval Command at K. Subhash Marg in the Naval Dockyard of Mumbai on January 25, 2016. The memorial is made from metal recovered from the ship. In February 2016, Bajaj unveiled a new motorbike made with metal from Vikrant's scrap and named it Bajaj V in honor of Vikrant. The Navy has named its first home-built carrier INS Vikrant in honor of INS Vikrant, R11. The new carrier is built by Cochin Shipyard Limited and will displace 40,000 t, 44,000 short tons. The keel was laid down in February 2009 and she was launched in August 2013. As of December 2016, the ship is being fitted out and is expected to be commissioned by the end of 2018. The decommissioned ship featured prominently in the film ABCD2 as a backdrop while it was moored near Dwarka in Mumbai.